2024 is a year that's been defined by layoffs and corporate greed. We can only hope that future years are defined by things that are a bit more fun, like Donkey Kong or electoral reform. But right now, this is the moment in history we live in, and we need to take a closer look at it. Sadly, in the form of a YouTube video and not a sniper scope. Because if you're feeling right now like video games are in a kind of dark and depressing place, then there's a very good reason for that. And it's easy to believe that this reason is something very immediately visible. Maybe it's those lazy devs or those snowflake game journalists. But a great man once said that the enemy does not arrive by Kotaku article, he arrives by earnings call. I promise you, unless you're one of those weird YouTube guys who literally only plays free-to-play first-person shooters and insists that gaming is dying because your gritty army man simulators aren't hitting like they used to, your actual problem is something that you don't see very much of. Your actual problem is executives. Because, hard to believe as it may be, most game devs don't want to make a bad game. They're often forced to pivot to microtransactions or live service elements or compromise their creative visions according to the whims of executives and by extension, shareholders, who only see things in terms of money. And while Japanese developers and executives are beholden to stricter worker protections, the idiocy of these Western executives, in Europe and particularly the US, has utterly spiraled out of control over the past couple years. Their money-grubbing edicts morphing games that had potential into commercial and critical flops that then sees the team who were just doing what they were told axed through the fault of the decisions of their superiors. Today, I hope to shine a light on some of the worst offenders in the same way that I would hope to use a magnifying glass to shine a light on a nest of ants that had eaten my dog and gotten me framed for its disappearance. I am your host, Fudge. My degree is in writing, my shares are in Foot Locker, because these are 5 video game executives who need to get reasoned with. They need to get reasoned with. You know, if you can believe it, this video was originally called something else. And then I took a cursory look at YouTube's terms and policies for no particular reason and decided to rename it. You can't see me winking at my webcam right now, but yes, this is 5 video game executives who maybe just need to be reasoned with. I'm going to keep this reasonably brief because there may or may not be a full-length palette swap video on Phil Spencer coming in the future, but I'll say this, Phil Spencer may have been the closest thing the American games industry had to an ethical CEO for quite some time. He's often talked about wanting to let the devs under his umbrella do their own thing and not forcing them to make any certain kind of game, which is why, for better or for worse, Rare, for example, have not made a new Banjo-Kazooie game, because most of the people who made Banjo-Kazooie are no longer with Rare, and so it tracks that the studio don't want to make it. Under his watch, Xbox also stepped away from the obnoxious, sports-obsessed, TV-centric image it projected in the early to mid-2010s and has become more inclusive and consumer-friendly, with Game Pass having long been the best deal available to consumers in the industry and Xbox being the leading force in game preservation, certainly more so than Sony or Nintendo have ever been. He's also been outspoken against NFTs and the like. Unfortunately, he is still a CEO and is therefore still a slug on the lettuce of life. The layoffs to Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks and the like are only the cherry on top of a layer cake of layoffs that have happened under Spencer's leadership in the past few years. Maybe just using your infinite money to buy up the competition instead of fostering the skills of homegrown devs to make good games for you wasn't actually the best possible approach all along. In an August 2020 email to 2 Microsoft marketing executives leaked via the FTC versus Microsoft legal battle over the acquisition of Activision Blizzard, Phil Spencer says that buying Nintendo would be a career moment for him, as if it's somehow impressive to use your literal billions upon billions of dollars to just spend your way to the top of the industry. If your acquisitions of other studios who have then gone on to release one game max over the course of 6 years are any indication, the most impressive career moment you could give us would be to quit and get a real job like working the counter at McDonald's. That's not a joke, that would legitimately be significantly harder than what you do right now. Of course, in the case of the Arcane Austin layoffs, it has been reported said that Bethesda and ZeniMax management were the ones to push Arcane, most known for their immersive Sims and single-player games, into turning colossal failure Redfall into a live service shooter, thus making it such a flop that layoffs maybe seemed necessary to the executives. But the fact remains that Phil was in charge when all this happened, and has taken responsibility for not supporting the game in the way Microsoft should have. Even if Matt Booty is the guy in charge of Xbox Game Studios day to day, Phil Spencer is the guy he answers to and can be held just as accountable. It is also insane to me, by the way, that there is a guy called Matt Booty who is so prominent in the industry, and that's just normal to us now. We've just gotten used to saying the name Matt Booty like that isn't the most fucking insane name anyone's ever had. Bro's name is Booty. Matt Booty. Anyway, it's all well and good to go on podcasts and apologise, Phil, but Satoru Iwata cut his own salary in half during the flop of the Wii U era to prevent from having to lay people off. Perhaps you or your executive buddies could have considered the same thing before decimating the team who made Xbox's literal best first-party exclusive in the past 10 years? Phil, I think you should get kicked reasoned with. At E3 2017, during the reveal of Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, Shigeru Miyamoto walked down the aisles of a conference hall to rapturous applause with a bullet bill-like gun fashioned on his arm. He then took his place on the stage alongside the seemingly chirpy CEO of Ubisoft to dive further into this game. On the surface, this seemed like a pretty fun, light-hearted way to reveal a video game. But unfortunately, this chirpy middle-aged man is one of the most despised executives in the gaming industry, which is saying something. Worse still, he's French. Yves Guillemot simply cannot seem to say the right things about the ongoing allegations of sexual workplace misconduct being levied at Ubisoft under his watch. On the subject of these allegations, in a 2022 interview with Axios, he said that the problems arose because of generational differences, saying, "The company was running and there were ways things were done. And then there was a new young generation coming into the company with different needs, and we had to adapt," adding, "and that's when we started sexually harassing them." Did you know that the phrase faux pas is French in origin? Yves Guillemot certainly does. In early 2023, after a disastrous 2022 that saw Ubisoft sales massively underperform and the approximate 878th delay of Skull and Bones, Guillemot sent out an email to staff attempting to rally the troops, in which he told them, "I am asking that each of you be especially careful and strategic with your spending and initiatives to ensure we are being as efficient and lean as possible. The ball is in your court to deliver this lineup on time and at the expected level of quality," said the CEO. When unionists, rightfully enraged by these comments, proposed a strike, he responded, "I'm sorry this was perceived that way." Skull and Bones did eventually come out, by the way, and despite being a subpar game at best by all accounts with more red flags surrounding its release than a fucking golf course, Guillemot described it as a quadruple A game, which can surely only be a reference to the sound you're likely to make upon discovering that they're charging $70 for it. Under Guillemot's guidance over the decades, whether he's just gotten stupider or more evil or both over time, Ubisoft has gone from a creative powerhouse delivering some of the most charming and colourful games Europe had to crow about to a trend-chasing slop factory of annual Assassin's Creed and NFTs and whatever live service bullshit they're dragging up the corpse of Tom Clancy for this year. And this is without again reminding you that he is credibly accused of being complicit in his employees' sex crimes, moving them to other departments so that they avoid scrutiny and attempting to silence such allegations. The French used to do something to people like this. What was it? Gasoline? Limousine? I can't remember. Whatever it was, get on it, Frenchies. But not before you get onto the Palette Swap Patreon, lest I fly into a blinding rage. Sorry, that was probably a bit much, wasn't it? The Palette Swap guys are always telling me to dial it back a bit, and I don't know, I get really intense when I'm plugging the Patreon. Maybe it's because it's so good. Early access to videos, names in video credits, voting on our Patreon exclusive listicles, access to our Discord, and so much more. If you want to give your money to an organisation not lorded over by a parasite in a suit jacket, we've got incentives and rewards galore. Thank you very much if you contribute to us at all. We've been going at this for nearly 6 months now whilst barely paying ourselves a dime. Hopefully soon, with your support, we can change that. One of the more invisible executives featured in this video, you're more likely to see one of the hundreds upon hundreds of videos and articles about Strauss Zelnick's fitness regime than you are about his many transgressions as CEO of Take-Two Interactive, the publisher behind Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, BioShock, and the 2K sports games. And surely such a busy man only achieves such a strapping body through the kinds of mental gymnastics required to justify laying off 5% of your staff, an estimated 580 people, while simultaneously doubling your own pay from 2022 to 2023, and then some, from $16 million a year to $42 million a year. Many of these layoffs being targeted at 2K's private division indie game label, containing studios like Roll7, who had just put out smash hit indie games like Ollie Ollie World and Rollerdrome, the latter of which winning multiple awards and being hailed as one of the best games of 2022. But of course, such success doesn't matter. The boss needs his protein shakes and jacuzzi back shots. Weirdly, despite all the evidence, including literal documentation suggesting that the private division label is being shut down entirely in spite of their CEO's doubling salary, Zelnick denies that this is the case, like some attempt at a Jedi mind trick from someone who doesn't have a mind. Zelnick, who comes primarily from a TV executive background and whose only experience with video games is being CEO of another company and consequently having access to cheat codes in real life, is about as classically soulless and corporate as they come. He's overseen the 2K sports games become riddled with microtransactions almost beyond parody, microtransactions that he specifically gets bonuses for, by the way, as it's written into his contract that he gets extra pay based on recurrent customer spending, or RCS, which is basically, you guessed it, microtransactions. And he's not been afraid to throw his weight around at the rest of the industry either, filing a legal dispute against Haze Light Studios, creators of It Takes Two, claiming that the name of the game was too similar to the name of the company, and for that reason they had to abandon their trademark application, making it harder for them to promote the game. It's still won Game of the Year though. Eat a dick. If only we could take people like Strauss Zelnick and just kick reason with them. Question: has there ever been a more comically evil looking man than Andrew Wilson? Yes, Argentina's current president looks like the killer in a slasher movie, but until then, no. Since Andrew Wilson took the helm of EA in 2013, he's spent his subsequent career completing side quests in a game about being a fuckhead. The year he came to power, EA was voted the worst company in America for the second time in a row. So former CEO John Riccitiello gets a huge assist for that. He's an honourable mention for this video, by the way. He might be the reason Silksong has taken as long as it has, but we don't have time to get into that right now. Quite unlike Strauss Zelnick, Andrew Wilson's corporate misdeeds are very well documented. The pure audacious insanity of Star Wars Battlefront 2's pay-to-win microtransactions was so obvious and so egregious that countries all around the world started debating legislation against such transactions in video games. Some of them have even acted upon it. During Wilson's reign, the already uninspired copy-paste FIFA series somehow stagnated further, whilst also introducing similarly predatory loot boxes and microtransactions from Ultimate Team and beyond. So predatory were these in-game purchases that courts in places like Austria outright ruled them unlawful and ordered refunds. The legacy of evil under Andrew Wilson could be a whole video of its own. It is, in fact, on many other channels, so I'll just say that any douchebag corporate move you can imagine an executive enacting in the games industry, he's done it. From shuttering studios for not living up to their ridiculous and unfair expectations, to corporate gaslighting, to forcing studios to make the kinds of games that are totally antithetical to what they stand for. Hello, Anthem. Hello, everything they've done with BioWare, in fact. Remember the fucking multiplayer mode they shoehorned into Mass Effect 3? The one they put in Dead Space 3? I mean, that's not BioWare, obviously, but Jesus Christ, multiplayer in Dead Space. Surely only the result of some executive seeing dollar signs in multiplayer after some bullshit focus testing or something. EA and Andrew Wilson are almost certainly the reason Dragon Age 4 has taken so long, by the way, because BioWare has spent about a decade having to act on EA's obscene corporate whims, making bullshit games that are totally outside of their wheelhouse, and having to fuck around with multiple builds of Dragon Age 4 like an always online version before finally getting to make the kind of game they want some 10 years after its predecessor. In 2022, Wilson was ranked by As You Sow, a shareholder advocacy group, as the 16th most overpaid CEO in North America, earning $40 million. He's since cut that figure in half to a measly $19 million a year, still nearly 200 times the yearly salary of the average EA employee, specifically because the shareholders were like, yeah, that's too much, buddy. I mean, the shareholders. When the fucking shareholders turn on you, that's how you know you're a dickhead. Andrew Wilson is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so as I've done so consistently throughout this video, I'm gonna urge peace and suggest that maybe we can just talk to him. What was that sound effect? Maybe you've heard of the name Embracer Group recently? See, a few years back in true fudge at a wedding fashion, they kind of just showed up and started eating everything. Acquisition after acquisition, investment after investment, there was no end to it. If you look up the amount of studios and IP Embracer Group own, you'll find something completely dizzying. It honestly might be easier to recap what random shit they don't own. But perhaps most notably, per a deal with Square Enix in the wake of its many failures in the Western games market, Embracer entered into an agreement to purchase most of Square's Western studios off of them, so Eidos Montreal, Square Enix Montreal, and Crystal Dynamics. These studios alone have put out stuff like Deus Ex, Thief, and Tomb Raider, IPs all now owned by Embracer. Embracer also unbelievably own Middle-earth Enterprises, which means they have the rights to make video games based on the Lord of the Rings now. I know it may be hard to believe, but yes, things could get worse. There could be another Hobbit movie. But that's unrelated. They could also make some shitty ass games. The thing is, Square Enix Montreal doesn't exist anymore, and in fact, nor do countless studios that once lived under the Embracer umbrella, and that's because Embracer has shuttered them. Lots of them. Free Radical, the makers of Time Splitters, no longer exist because Embracer acquired them and shut them down. Volition, the makers of Saints Row, no longer exist because Embracer acquired them and shut them down. An unannounced Deus Ex game that was in the works from Eidos Montreal no longer exists because of the damage done by layoffs Embracer inflicted on its staff. If we don't get another Deus Ex game in the next 20 years, or hell, ever, that's because of Embracer Group. And why, you may ask, would you acquire all these studios and IP just to shut them down? Well, that wasn't the plan. CEO Lars Wingefors had a plan, but it didn't work out. Unfortunate. What was that plan again? Oh, that's right, it was a $2 billion investment deal with Saudi Arabia. That's what the stability of the entire organisation hinged on. Makes sense. I mean, if you can't trust a bunch of Saudi Arabian business moguls, who can you trust? And now Lars Wingefors' house of heavily branded and IP-laden cards has come crashing down. 2024 is a record year for layoffs in the gaming industry, having far eclipsed previous record year 2023, less than halfway through. This is because of a lot of evil, stupid white guys, but it's probably because of Embracer Group more than anything, letting their employees fall on the sword because the CEO's stupid all eggs in one basket business move didn't pay off, and now they can't pay actually talented people to work. Whilst thousands upon thousands of people have been axed from Embracer Group's ocean of studios and teams over the past few years, it's notable that CEO Lars Wingefors, the one who who got them into this mess isn't one of them. Everyone else has suffered for his failure, but he's still there, in a high-paying executive position. In a 2023 interview in the midst of Embracer's approximate third catastrophic industry-destroying breakdown, Wingefors was quoted as saying, "I'm sure I deserve a lot of criticism, but I don't think my team or companies deserve all the criticism." Lars, buddy, what you deserve is every single one of the thousands upon thousands of people you fired to get to kick you in the balls as hard as humanly possible. Me? I'm just a humble YouTuber slash satirist slash comedian slash musician slash renaissance man. I would simply advocate for a good old fashioned stern talking to. Hey, there's that sound effect again. It's easy to feel incredibly depressed about the state of video games in 2024. They're literally still making Assassin's Creed. But I want to take this moment to remind you of the brilliance we have bubbling right under the surface of the corporate suits and ivory towers. I'm of course talking about indie games. Right now, as I make this video, I'm playing through a game called Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom. I got it for about 12 quid on the Steam summer sale, and it's the best 3D platformer I've played in years. Not enough people are talking about it, and it would literally be a top 20 game on the Dreamcast. It is full of charm and colour and personality, and you play as a taxi, and there has never been a bad game that's let you do that. And that's the thing about indie games. Every week, 3 nerds in a basement in Brussels release a video game the quality of a first-party Nintendo game for like $10. They're out there. This is your reminder to support them. Wishlist the ones you want on Steam, buy them when they come out, and talk about them. Let them be the conversation, rather than the 400th fucking Star Wars game of the past 10 years. Get the Yellow Taxi game if you like fun and being a taxi. Fuck CEOs, fuck the IDF, fuck JK Rowling, fuck Adobe, fuck Easter, shit holiday, fuck brunch, fuck shopping for mattresses, fuck koalas who are too stupid to realise that the eucalyptus leaves they're addicted to hold no nutritional value, and that's why your lazy ass has to fucking sleep all the time. Fuck executives, fuck Jacket Potato, and thank you to our legendary tier patrons: Serial Law Obeyer, Kinslow TN, Bijan Imadi, Bad Speller, Strawberry, and Yo Adrian. Thank you guys very much. Much appreciated. And I'll see you again soon for more peace-loving content that will surely unite us all.